go back. Okay. There she is. Okay, perfect. All right, I'm just going to start. So, my name is Robin Gunkel, and I'm the founder of Mushroom City Art Festival. So, yeah, it's really cool to be presenting at the festival that worked to organize, also with Kimberly Moon sitting over here. And yeah, I'm presenting on my doctoral work. And so it's about reciprocity. And so this is my dissertation proposal. So I don't have my doctorate yet. I'm actually turning in, it's in the process of being written, and I'm turning it in the end of this month. So this is kind of like a reflection of where my work is currently at. Yeah. So I go to, my school's in Prescott, Arizona, and I'm a like low residency student, so I head up there like once a year. So beginning first with my stance, so it's kind of like an academic thing, but it's basically like this is my lens that influences what I'm seeing like, as a researcher. So acknowledging that I'm white, I'm cisgender, I'm a settler, I'm not native to the Americas, Baltimorean, poet. Actually, this concept of the Yin Frontier, the like flash drive I have in here, like it has like poems from like 10 years ago that have like the same title. So there's been like a whole like full arc in like developing this concept. And community organizer, so happening around us. And so the piece here that really influences my work is that I grew up in a family of impoverished relationships. So like my mom has schizophrenia, and my older sister had really profound Down syndrome, and my father was really like remote, like stoic. And so everyone had all these really like profound needs, and no one's needs were really met because everyone's needs were so intense. So there was this incredible atomization that I grew up with. And so I've become really interested in networks and relationships and community connection. And mycelium is like a metaphor for that connectivity. So my work, and it's a little different here. I was describing this to Manoj, she was our first speaker for the day. He said, oh, that's a lot. And it's like, it is. Usually, like someone will focus down on like a, like more narrow area for their doctoral work. And I tend to be, I'm spreading more out like a mycelial mat, and I've got 3 separate areas. So one's related to the Wood Wide Web, a plant medicine center in Peru, and a bioremediation collective that I'll tell you more about. My research methods. So, comparative historical inquiry. I'm comparing the Wood Wide Web and grandmothers, and therefore, like their exchange of resources, social networks and natural networks. I have another one that's autoethnography, writing about my personal experiences. But I'm also going to be integrating some interviews into that too, with some ayahuasqueros. And then a participatory action research node, which is the direct action that's happening in the community with the bioremediation collective. So my theoretical perspective is a blend of textual analysis, personal experience, and community engagement. I think of the researcher as like the eye in the center of the mandala, like embedded within one's community. And that all of us are truly the eye in the center of our own communities. We're all the eye in the center. So I have a rhizome of literature, and I'm looking at, like I have this textual analysis, something I refer to as emotional mycelium, and that's what I think of as like the invisible networks of connections between people, between social networks, and there's like constellations of relationships. Bye, Jared. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay, cool. And then hopefully with the remediation work, a cultivation of physical mycelium. So this is my evolving research question. And what I've learned about being a doctoral student is that your research question keeps changing. It doesn't stay the same. So mine's still, it's broad. This is the one that arches across all the nodes. But they are, what is a Yin Frontier? How might a Yin Frontier present itself as a network integral to regenerative culture? And how might a Yin Frontier also be integral to social and spiritual resistance? So this Yin Frontier, this is something that we maybe associate with women, the concept of yin, but that I really want to acknowledge that there's a gender construction of masculine and feminine, that the yin is often mapped on to women, but that the yin is something that can equally be possessed by men, anyone, that whether they identify as binary or not, but that there is, the yin, this feminine quality is something that we all possess in different ways. And so I found this graphic online. But this just shows like the way that like the masculine and feminine have been created. And so like all of like the intuitive relationship, like heart-centered kind of emotive piece goes on to the feminine, and then onto the masculine, which is dominant in the dominant Western culture that we live within, and that this is what's emphasized and more highly valued, is like the decisiveness and the action and logic, but that we see that there's a true undervaluing of the feminine and of relationships and cultures of care and larger networks. So I'm going to talk about my lit reviews. These are the writers I'm reading right now. And two of the key ones are Dr. Kristen Hotz, who pioneered with some other researchers the idea of the grandmother hypothesis that I'm going to tell you about. And Dr. Suzanne Simard, who's done a lot of research with the work of the exchange of resources between trees on the Wood Wide Web. Okay, so the grandmother hypothesis. So it supposes that it was not man the hunter, but grandmothers who were responsible for keeping the extended family and tribe fed. Men only brought home big game 3.4% of the time, whereas grandmothers in their steady foraging of tubers brought home steady and consistent meals to feed the extended tribe and family. So by grandmothers providing this reliable food source, natural selection favored the genes of longer-lived women past childbearing capability. And these women were critical to human survival. So it's like we have this like exchange of resources through the social network, but that this also leads to the longer life of humanity. That this is a theory that's been developed. So by natural selection, favoring these elder women who no longer bore children, grandmothers were free to take care of their extended families. Alright, so an interesting thing here, so in the animal kingdom, chimpanzees are frail and they die shortly at the end of their childbearing years, whereas human women are healthy, strong, and resourceful well past menopause. So this kind of this lends some kind of like a powerful point to the grandmother hypothesis, that this might be how we have developed to have longer lives through grandmother's foraging. Okay, and so in humanity's ancient origins, women played a key role in both the long life and survival of the human species. And then I contrast this with the ancient origins of fungi. Okay. So the earliest fungi appeared 1 billion years ago. Though this photo would be more like 13 million years ago. This is an image of Prototaxites. So this was a giant fungi that used to rule the earth. image, artistic representation. So quoting or looking at Paul Stamets' work, when plants migrated onto land, they formed an ancient connection with fungi that allowed them access to minerals in the soil. And if you were out by the circle this morning, Justin was actually like really talking pretty directly about some of the things Stamets has been saying about fungi creating conditions for other land on Earth to thrive. So, and you might be familiar with this, fungi perform the role of an externalized stomach and their secretion of acids into the environment. And they also work as an ecosystems engineer. So, similar to the role of the grandmother in the grandmother hypothesis, fungi provide sustenance for a larger web of life to ensure this web's longer-term survival. Right, you might know this. Humanity is more closely related to fungi on the tree of life than plants. Conversely, it is no accident that human hemoglobin and plant chlorophyll share similar biochemical structure, or that humans breathe oxygen produced by plant respiration, and that plants depend on the carbon dioxide produced by humans and other animals. In many native myths, plants are acknowledged as the first life or the grandparents of humans and animals. So on both accounts, we can think of fungi and plants as our grandparents. So this brings me to the first node of my work. Getting into the symbiosis on the Wood Wide Web. Okay, my question. So I have questions that are specific to my notes. What are some of the similarities between how ancient grandmothers shared resources with their extended family and how resources are shared on the Wood Wide Web between plants? Okay, and so this is an image of a Hadza woman. As I am saying this, So Dr. Kristen Hawkes, she studied the Hadza who live in Tanzania, and it was from studying the Hadza that she developed the grandmother hypothesis. But just also to acknowledge that we can kind of deconstruct the idea of an anthropologist going to study another group of people, just to have that level of awareness too. But the grandmother hypothesis was developed from her observing the foraging patterns of this group of people that have lived so traditionally for thousands of years, and that they really present a clue for how humanity's most ancient ancestors may have lived. That said, their lives are changing dramatically, and through lots of researchers visiting them, it has also brought more tourists to go visit them and change some of their traditional ways that they're really being impacted by larger Western dominant culture. Just going to make an acknowledgement of that too. And so this is a mother tree. So this is a term that was coined by Dr. Suzanne Simmer, a forest ecologist. But it really speaks to traditional ecological knowledge, indigenous wisdom, and that this tree is connected to the trees all around it through the shared mycorrhizal network. And this tree will preferentially share resources with other trees that are sick or distressed, will share resources preferentially with its baby saplings, and we'll even make sure that its roots don't crowd the roots of its saplings. And so the symbiosis that we observe in the forest really stands in stark contrast to the idea, this ruling ideology that's been part of the industrial age of nature being red in tooth and claw, and that dominance and predation are really what's been emphasized in our culture, in our stories about nature, and larger humanity's relationship to the natural world, in our economic system too, that is quite predatory, limitless growth, and to think just how much that idea shapes so much of the dominant worldview. So I believe that telling a story of reciprocity is really important for part of the kind of the great cultural turning that we're undertaking right now. So these are two trees, the Douglas fir and paper birch. And so the Douglas fir, Simard, she conducted series of experiments with these trees, where the Douglas fir was shaded so that it was unable to photosynthesize. And what happened was that the paper birch started sending nutrients, carbon and phosphorus, over to the Douglas fir when it couldn't photosynthesize. And then later, when the Douglas fir was unshaded and the paper birch lost its leaves, the resource exchange flipped and the Douglas fir started exchanging resources over to the paper birch. Trees communicate with each other through their shared mycorrhizal network. If you have a tree that is attacked by aphids, it can uptake its chemical response to that attack, and then also send electrochemical signals through the wood wide web to tell the other trees to uptake their chemical response to the insect infestation. Like that communication, like through the mycorrhizal network, there are also, like trees also give off volatile organic compounds, plants. So there's messaging that happens through the mycorrhizal network, but then there's also like other messaging, right? And ways of like warding off like predators that trees and other plants exhibit. And so this is really, it's exciting research that's happening right now to just really understand how intelligent plants are and, you know, all of life. This is a quote from famous cell biologist Lynn Margulis. She says, "Symbiosis is not a marginal or rare phenomenon. It is natural and common. We abide in a symbiotic world." And so we do. However, you're like, Robin, this is a more complex story. You just created a binary. You've told us about survival of the fittest. You've told us about symbiosis. There are other types of relationships on the Wood Wide Web. What about mycoheterotrophy? What about parasitism? I picked a couple of parasites just to complexify the discussion more. And so I have a plant parasite on the left, and then a fungal pathogen on the right. And the plant parasite on the left is known, its common name is dodder. Its genus is Cuscuta, and it's a vampire plant. It tangles itself around other plants. It largely does not photosynthesize itself. So it gets its nutrients by draining other plants of their nutrients. So it like fuses its vascular system with its host and it drains them. However, the dodder functions in a similar fashion to the Wood Wide Web in that, again, if there was like an insect infestation, the dodder would relay the electrochemical stress signals through its network to the other plants. So it's in the interest of the parasite to keep the host alive. Sometimes parasites are keystone species. So think of it. Complexify our ideas. The wheat lacoche on the right, so this is a fungal pathogen that's infected this corn. Has anyone here tried wheat lacoche? Yeah? Yeah, like at the Mexican, yeah, me too. Yeah.
Is that corn smut?
Yeah, the corn smut, and it's really good. So conceivably, a farmer that has their fields infected with the wheat lacoche could actually still make a profit from selling that to restaurants. So my second node is a plant medicine hub. So this is my teacher's center in the Peruvian Amazon. It's on a boiling river, near boiling river in the Amazon. You can see the steam coming off of it. And I was able to learn about the medicinal plants. Like Eric today was leading the Yoga of Plants walk and told people about all the personalities of the plants and how to identify them on the walk. And I got to learn about some of the plants there and also like their spirit presences too. So this is Vina to the left. She's a Hawaiian work study, and she's just leading us out on the walk and starting to show us around. She's giving here a mapacho offering this is Chulichaki. So Chulichaki is kind of small in the photo. It looks like a small stump, but Chulichaki is actually a huge spirit. And so Chulichaki is the king of the forest. And actually the spirit presence of this tree is known to take human form and to like lure loggers off, like away from the jungle. And so, we didn't, we left mapacho offerings for plants on our walk, like when we would take roots or leaves. We didn't take anything from the Chulichaki, but she's just giving the mapacho offering to it to just really honor it for its work that it does in the larger ecosystem of the forest. And then this tree here is wasai, and it's interesting. I've never seen a tree like this before going on this walk, because its roots grow bunched above the ground like that. And we harvested some of the roots, and you can make. She made medicine out of it that I got to watch her make in the ayahuasca kitchen. But it's for your kidneys, like if you have kidney disease, and for your urinary tract. And again, the mapacho was left as an offering after we took some of the roots. Okay, so again, this idea of being in reciprocal exchange with the forest. Okay. And then there's Vina brewing the wasai in the ayahuasca kitchen, bright red in color. Okay. And then this is chacruna. So this plant is 1/2 of the ayahuasca medicine. This is the feminine half of ayahuasca. And the chacruna is actually, it's dieted on for having visions. So I dieted on the chacruna while I was at my Antioquio. And the spirit of chacruna is a young, green, lithe woman, like a princess. And then this is Danielle. Maestro Flores, this was his center. He's an Ashaninkan healer. I was at Maestro Flores' center. And this is his son, Danielle, who is harvesting the Renhelia root. And it actually has a little liquid inside that's a lot like water that I was able to drink. And it's for I guess cleansing bad dreams. Having visions. And this tree is Iosquero, and this is a really powerful, potent tree that only the ayahuasqueros diet on. You can't cross the diet. So when you're taking a plant medicine, there's strict mostly rice and lentils, maybe vegetables, no salt, no sugar, no oils, no alcohol. So that diet, it's really important with the Iosquero because it's such a powerful plant. And crossing the diet, eating meat while you're dieting on this plant could kill someone. So, but it is for protection, for curing cancer. And so it's a huge spirit, and the spirit presence of the tree I was told was like an old native person with long white hair, an old native man. And okay, so I took these, my teacher actually took these photos. I think I like the simplicity of them. But just to kind of bring it back, like talking about reciprocity in the forest when harvesting plants, and then the reciprocity that is expressed in ceremonies based there. When someone sings an icaro, they're singing the icaro in exchange for healing. The icaros come directly from the plant spirits. They reveal themselves to the curanderos. So to recognize that there's like many communications that are happening, and that there's a interspecies communication that happens in the plant medicine ceremony. And as I'm talking about the spirits, maybe also encourage us just to kind of stretch our thinking here too, and not to just think of it metaphorically, and to recognize that the current culture that we live in has this incredible materialist worldview that thinks that the only things that are real are things that you can like physically see and touch, but it's like the same culture that's destroying the planet. And recognizing just the incredible value and richness of indigenous wisdom traditions, and seeing them as a whole cosmological worldview, and that even like the idea of superstition is the fragmentation of someone else's whole cosmological worldview. So just to kind of broaden that might be part of the work that we're doing right now, along with like Green New Deal and becoming just more conscious in our own lives. It's just maybe like opening up to seeing the world in other ways that our dominant culture has taught us that isn't real, but maybe there's more dimensionality and subtleness that isn't as apparent to us. All right, and then the last node is the creation of Rise Renewal Collective. So this is a bioremediation collective, and we're working to bioremediate a lead-contaminated lot in East Central Baltimore, which has 1,200 parts per million of lead in the soil. The national standard for lead is 400 parts per million, and that's still high compared to European standards. And so this is kind of, we got a grant from the Pollination Project. But this has been a project that has been going on slowly for the last couple of years, and then it's kind of like, truthfully hit a little bit of a rut recently, and then just kind of needs that push to keep going. But I'll tell you what we've done so far. So we got a grant from the Pollination Project. It was a $1,000 seed grant, and so it's to bioremediate this lot. And there's like a photo of us, like almost like 2 years ago. Sam in the back, she's actually outside. She's got the dyed mushroom yarns. She's the mushroom nurse. This is an image from the neighborhood that we're working in. So you can see a little bit of the history. Those are like police cars from like the 1930s. But that's like the wall of the Greenmount Cemetery, which is directly across the street from the lot that we're working on. And then the Greenmount Coffee Lab, that orange building in the back, that's where Rebuild Johnston Square. Johnston Square is the community where this lot resides, and they hold their community meetings there. So I go to their meetings every month. And then this is a view inside the cemetery, and you can, like, I guess the lot's like all the way back over here, but just getting a sense of the larger landscape. And then here we are this last spring, sheet mulching the lot. It's about 1/10 of an acre in size, and we laid down cardboard and hay and horse manure, straw, wood chips to build up the soil and create like a layer of nutrition, and then cover up the lead contaminated soil. And this is a photo of me with some members of Rebuild Johnston Square. And just to really say about them, that they are just a really powerful regenerative force, and that the work that Rise Renewal Collective is doing is like really tiny and quite insignificant in comparison to the work that they're doing. Like they secured like $1 million grant to like rehab one of their parks, and like they're bringing a lot of like new stakeholders to the table to really talk about their community and transform it. And so here we are, shoveling some Douglas fir wood chips onto the lot last spring. And these were the results that we got back. We sent our soil samples off to the University of Delaware. And so we had heavy metal testing done. And as you see, the lead's really high. It's at 1,200 parts per million. And I was told actually that the chromium's a little bit high too. And then there we are again, in the middle of our remediation work. It's like, we did like 15 truckfuls of like that horse manure from Charm City Farms. It was really lucky that they had that so that we could use that in our work. And so what we did at the end of last spring was we planted brown mustard. And brown mustard is a brassica, and so it pulls lead up out of the soil. So there's different ways to approach bioremediation, and so lead can't be broken down into anything smaller. Like mushrooms eat lots of things, but they don't eat lead because lead's already like an element. But you can either immobilize the lead and make the lead less bioavailable in the soil so that it's not taken up by plants, or you can extract the lead out of the soil. And that was our first approach. And so we planted this brown mustard. It's a brassica. It doesn't form mycorrhizae connections, actually. It has a long taproot, so it went down beneath that sheet mulch to pull up the lead. And then this is the lot. The yellow flowers are like the beginning of June, and then like that brown field is the beginning of July. And then, well, I don't have a slide for that. The bioremediation project for me into this idea of reciprocity. And Robin Kamara, so she wrote Braiding Sweetgrass. She's an indigenous writer, and she speaks very poignantly about this concept of reciprocal restoration. Reciprocal restoration is the mutually reinforcing restoration of land and culture such that repair of ecosystem services contributes to cultural revitalization, and renewal of culture promotes restoration of ecological integrity. Based on the indigenous stewardship principle that what we do to the land, we do to ourselves, restoration of land and culture are inseparable. This approach rises from a creative symbiosis between traditional ecological knowledge and restoration science, which honors and uses the distinctive contributions of both intellectual traditions. Reciprocal restoration recognizes that it is not just the land that is broken, but our relationship to it. Reciprocal restoration encompasses repair of both ecosystem and cultural services while fostering renewed relationships of respect, responsibility, and reciprocity. All flourishing is mutual. Okay, so it's this, I'm starting to tailor my research questions that I'm going to ask the different stakeholders that are part of this group towards reciprocal restoration, and talking about like culture and land like being in a symbiosis with each other, but putting it more in like a language that might speak more directly to the Johnston Square community. And that's my work. So I got like, it's spread out. I got some really different things. But this is the concept of the Yin Frontier, and I conceive of the first node with the grandmothers, you know, this like intellectual piece, like is the head, and then the plants is like the heart, and then the bioremediation is the hands, and it's like this whole body thing that comes together. So thank you for listening to me talk, and I'd love to answer any questions you have. Yeah. to like suck in. And I was saying earlier that I'm also the organizer for Mushroom City Art Festival, so it's like keeps me. Yeah.
The leggings.
Oh, thank you. I got so many compliments today. I kept getting tagged like on Facebook. People are like, "Wow, they have these leggings," and I'm like, "Oh, all right." Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like really sorry I missed the first part of this talk. This is like why I came here.
Oh.
Where can I find this video?
You know, so my friend, I was on the, there was this thing called Psilocybin Summit, and that was recorded. And so my talk is there. He asked me for my PowerPoint. I haven't given it to him yet because I haven't put my references in. And it's kind of like a bad thing for an academic not to have their references at the end of their PowerPoint. But that will be going up, and so you will eventually be able to find it on the Psilocybin Summit page. And oh, it also got, I gave a talk in San Francisco as part of Bloom Network, which is this group for like building regenerative culture. Mushroom City is actually part of it. It just hasn't overtly been messaged in that way, but we are part of that network too. And yeah, Bloom Network, and they recorded my talk, so I could follow up with them and ask if they're going to post it anywhere. So it's pretty much the same talk. Maybe it's evolved a little bit since I first gave it in August. Yeah. Yeah. So, or if you have any questions about Mushroom City or getting started.
Yeah, I talked to him a little bit. I got some lines made and
Oh yeah.
reishi. I'm super excited.
Oh yeah, with Mushroom Life with Michael and Mandy. Yeah. I think I might go out to get one of their t-shirts too. Yeah.
I can't remember exactly. I want to ask, there was some plant or substance, Calaria or, and I can't remember now what it was.
Oh, one of the plants. What was the property of it?
Or what is it?
Oh.
I can't remember the name of it though now.
The ranunculum?
Huh?
The roots that had the liquid inside?
It was a little bit later.
Okay.
It was after the chacruna.
After the chacruna. Ioscuro?
No, well, Iosquero is the person.
Powerful one.
The person.
Yeah, and and they all the plants have spirits that are associated with them.
Mm-hmm.
So like when the icaros are sung, that calls the plant spirits in the ceremony. Yeah.
Do they say that the Iosqueros, the plants talk to them, so they learn? That's how they learn their
The icaros,
their art.
they come from the plants. So I'm pretty excited about it. I have someone on my dissertation committee. Her name is Monica Gagliano, and she wrote a book called Thus Spoke the Plant. And she's a plant scientist, and she's like pioneered like plant like bioacoustics, and her experiments like demonstrate like cognition and learning in plants. But she's also been to South America and worked with plant medicines and kind of writes about those experiences of communicating with the plants. And so she's really wonderful in that she's very open, and she really holds both like the left and right ways of thinking simultaneously, which I think is just so valuable. Like I think that like left dominated masculine consciousness is like needs to be like balanced out like with the right more. Like we can hold both, like for problem solving or understanding, seeing, feeling in different ways. So yeah, I think the feminine's rising, but in service of like everyone. Cool. The talk after this one.